Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Slow to Speak podcast. This is the place where myself and others like me explore ideas around culture, current events, spirituality, and philosophy. This is the digital fireside chat where you are invited to pull up a chair and join us in the simple joy that comes from a curious and engaging dialogue about the things that shape and affect our lives. I wasn't really sure whether or not I would turn this into an episode. In many ways, I think I turned to writing this because it was helping me process my own feelings and thoughts around current events, but as I wrote, I thought to myself, maybe this one would be okay to share. So welcome to a page out of my journal, friends, and some of my internal processing. My hope is that perhaps you'll be helped as I have by doing this. We live a strange existence in the West when you really pause to think about it. There are many different elements of our lives that don't change much. And what I mean by this is that our experiences are as we would expect them to be. The sports leagues we watch are all still proceeding on schedule. The 24/7 news cycle keeps spinning. Survivor is still pushing out new seasons. It's a fairly safe bet to say that we can have a pretty good idea of what our next day or next couple of weeks will look like for the most part. But at the same time that all of this is happening, if we're honest, we can feel as if things are spiraling out of control around us sometimes. Inevitably, this gives way to greater and greater entropy, or just the feeling of chaos. Wars are popping off around the world, and people around us care very much about how they're going. With each passing month, there's another country or group attacking a different one, and these things affect our communities, they affect our wallets because of the global economy. All of these things feel connected. Political violence is becoming increasingly commonplace. Maybe we're just hearing about it more now, but planes feel like they're literally just falling out of the sky. Financial markets feel increasingly unpredictable with global unrest. And our food, at least in America, seems hopelessly polluted, and we will all have cancer at some point. The German word Weltschmerz, meaning world pain, gets at this idea of deep sadness and this disembodied sensation. But we don't just feel the sadness. I think we also feel the fragility of it all. It's as if the normal things in our life feel increasingly delicate with every new disaster that we hear about. Almost like all these things that keep us grounded are sitting on top of a very thin sheet of glass, and all it takes is one small marble falling onto it to shatter the whole thing and send it all away. We don't know when the ball will drop. In the back of our minds, there's this very small voice that might be asking, even unconsciously, when am I, or the people that I most love, going to be next? When will I be directly impacted by the next disaster? What is safe? What are we supposed to do with all this information? How do we process it all, hour after hour, day after day, week after week? When will the chaos and the suffering stop? When will I have a day where I don't have to read a news headline or see in a passing glance that someone else somewhere is dead, dying, or suffering? Surely this isn't all that life on this world, on this earth, has turned out to be. I know there are good times, but why do they feel so outnumbered by the bad? Writing this, I feel these words and sensations. It's what has compelled me to spontaneously process this out loud with all of you. In these feelings, I find myself reminded actually of a line from Gandalf, a character in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings series, specifically of a line from Peter Jackson's film adaptations of The Hobbit. To give context, we're at a moment in the story where the leaders of the good world are figuring out how to resist and defeat the rising threat of the evil darkness of Saruman. The Queen Galadriel asks Gandalf why he has chosen such a small in stature creature as the Hobbit or halfling Bilbo to play such a central role in this conflict. Here is how Gandalf replies.
Mithrandir, why the halfling?
I do not know. Saruman believes that it is only a great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I found it is The small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay. Simple acts of kindness and love. Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps it is because I'm afraid. And it gives me courage.
First of all, I love this line. It plays on the topic of one of my more recent episodes where I spoke on why it can be so beneficial to read and experience fiction as an adult. But there's a profound truth in this scene that calls out a lie that we may well believe in our own lives when we're sucked into feelings of hopelessness at the pain, the suffering, and the confusion, or the darkness in the world. There's a narrative that would have you believe that it is only great power that can put an end to all the world's evils and suffering. Some new president or climate activist or other world leader who has the power to actually do something, we think. But Gandalf disagrees with this, and I think I do too. I believe it is in the quiet, everyday goodness of ordinary people that we can most resist the darkness in the world. The daily decisions that you and I make that affect our lives and the lives of those around us. Family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, communities, and through them, the nation and the world. But this isn't just some fanciful idea that sounds particularly good from a mythical story. No, this idea of the profound impact of our small everyday decisions is actually pulled from the pages of Christian scripture. There are, in fact, many places this is demonstrated. But there's a passage from Jeremiah, chapter 29, that I want to pull from specifically. God's people are going to be in exile, which means they're going to have to call home a land that is not their own. It will not be familiar. It will not be comfortable. It certainly would not be preferred. And while they're called to live in such an undesirable place, look at how God instructs his people to live. He says in verse 5, "Build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters, find wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." At the very beginning, God says to build houses and to settle down, to plant gardens and eat what they produce. These are not things you do to obtain great power. These are simple things, as simple as throwing seed into soil and taking care of it each day. Now let me try and connect the dots, at least in my own head. The shadows of darkness, what's wrong in the world, they feel like they're getting longer and longer. They're covering more ground than we thought possible. At times, it can feel as though that darkness is nipping at our heels and invading the edges of our personal spaces. Things can feel so wrong or so sad that we can almost feel like surely this isn't the way things are supposed to be. Surely being at home in the world should feel better than this. If this is what living in the world means, then why does it have to feel so hard to just stay above the water when you have things like sickness, financial difficulties, or relationships? How do we push back against the hard things? How do we make things better or bring good things to the table? I think we're to do what God told his people when they were away from home in exile. We should plant gardens. I think we should be cultivators and seed sowers to seek the peace and the prosperity of the city and those around us. These are not decisions that require extravagant power or extensive influence. These are those little decisions that add up to be the very things that actually can keep darkness at bay. When our world says, live for you, I think we are to live for one another. When the world says, store up, I think we are to cast out our seed. When the world says an eye for an eye, I think we're to turn the other cheek. When the world says the self has no authority above it, I think that perhaps we can say proudly that we do. He just isn't what you think. He's not an earthly king, he is above it. He is above all earthly powers or dominions or rulers or kings. That's my authority, and he happens to be a good father too. And let me be clear. Some people are believing the lie that we can espouse our Christian religion with one political party over the other. Within my own city, there recently was a church leader driving by the No Kings protest, blasting "God Bless America" and saying proudly, "I have a king." This is a distortion. It's not communicating fidelity to Christ alone. Let me say it another way. If there are things your political party and its leaders do that are contrary to Scripture, as a follower of Jesus, you must be against those things and for the kingdom. If there's any part of you that felt particularly upset or uncomfortable at choosing the kingdom values over your party's, I think you need to wrestle with that. And this is both politically right and left. It's not one party's issue. This is a human issue. I've heard it put like this. If you were to summarize kingdom values of the early church into 5 broad categories, they would be commitment to the sanctity of life, a sexual counterculture, a multi-ethnic community of Jews and Gentiles, care for the poor and the marginalized, and a non-retaliatory, non-violent love. We see the first 2 are typically what we in America associate with the politically right, a commitment to the sanctity of life and a sexual counterculture. The second 2 are what we typically associate with the left, a multi-ethnic community that values diversity and care for the poor and the marginalized of society, considered justice work. Each political party holds 2 of those values, but what doesn't fit either is the non-retaliatory, non-violent love. How do we reconcile this in our context today? We must wrestle with this. But did you catch that? I didn't say that we should think about wrestling with this. If you follow Jesus, if you submit to him, then you must wrestle with this. Now, to get back to the theme of planting gardens, the hard work of wrestling with this is like pulling up weeds as they pop up. Weeds that would lead you to hate, resent, belittle, or revile another person. But what about the cultivation of the garden? In this, I don't want you to hear from me. I want you to hear from Joshua Luke Smith. I don't know much about Smith. I do know that he is a spoken word artist, and he delivered his poem Sunflowers in Babylon at the recent ARC conference earlier this year. The conference ended with this poem, and I would much rather you hear it from the artist himself than from me. I'll also link the video in the description below, and I'll also link a podcast of a review of the ARC conference done by Justin Brierley on his podcast, if you'd like to learn more about the conference itself. Admittedly, I don't know much about the conference, and I don't know which way it leans, but this spoken word poem is very powerful and gets at this idea of considering what it means to plant gardens in such dark days.
When Uncle Terry died, we placed sunflowers on his casket. No children survived him, so he tithed his savings to the conservation of butterflies. The church was cold. Those old stones holding the stories of 30 or so generations, matrimony and lament, baptism and dedications. He was the last of his siblings, so now buried was a lineage like those sunflowers that he cherished. We printed a picture of him standing beneath one and decided that was how he'd be remembered. All those memories now sunk beneath the soil. But when spring arrives and thaws the frost-bound ground, they will not rise. Their time has come and gone. We are but butterflies, fluttering for a day and believing it is forever. What can I say of a life that was so weathered? And by that, I mean, my uncle lived seasonally. How else do you plant a garden unless you submit to both the summer and the wintering? His calloused hands told the story of handling living things. The bleak, cold mornings and that joy of welcome spring, the pain of mourning what could have been, and the joy in receiving the gifts the giver came to bring. Are we not standing in the gardens planted by our forefathers? Are we not reaping a harvest we didn't sow? Are we not leaning on the limbs of an oak and standing within the shade of a forest that someone else chose to grow? Martin Luther was asked, if you knew tomorrow the world would end and today would be your last, how would you spend it? And he said, I would plant an apple tree. The Greeks believed a society only thrives when people plant trees they know they'll never live to see. So how fickle we have been, tossed by every changing wind, giving in before we have become a witness. Yes, there is the life we live, but there is the unlived life within us, and between the two stands the resistance. Nietzsche put it like this: it is long obedience in the same direction that brings heaven to our streets. So summon the critic, bring me the cynic, I'll tell him this: blessed are the meek. Blessed is the one who still believes, childlike, impoverished, hardly able to even speak, but who has not forgotten Solomon's wisdom. For it is not the lack of wealth, reputation, or esteem, but the absence of vision that brings people to their knees. So distracted by our greed and our lust to succeed, we have gathered into barns instead of casting out our seed. And yet it is the back scarred by wooden beams and the sacrifice of fools that remind us of the actions that actually move us closer to the renewal. Did you hear of Fukushima? When the sea brewed and the earth hurled herself into the ground, a nuclear site erupted. An invisible storm rained down, contaminating the land and poisoning the food, and they evacuated thousands, but for those that couldn't move, they stayed housed in, surrounded by elusive clouds that lingered like ghosts, becoming suspicious of the air that they once innocently consumed. And yet, amongst the chaos, there was a monk dressed in crimson hues who walked through those fields planting sunflower seeds within the ruins. And over time they grew and they removed the poison, sunflowers, offering themselves as objects of both beauty and atonement. They drew the cancer from the ground into themselves until it was broken down, announcing, where sunflowers lift their golden crowns, we find evidence of this hope. Even in the soil of decay, something beautiful can grow. I hear the voice of an ancient prophet speaking to a depleted people, housed in the walls of exile and defeat. They are longing for a home they've only heard of, a city they're unsure of, a country where they hope to be, and it is to them this wild man comes with fire on his tongue. He descends with a word from the God that they have almost forgotten, and he says, do you want a revolution? Do you want a revelation? Do you want to renew your vision and reshape a broken nation? Do you want to overthrow the systems that have polluted the minds of your children and your spirits? Do you want to live in abundance and remember where you come from? Do you want to do the will of God, or at least undo the will of demons? Do you want to see people prosper in every sphere and across every tier of meaning? Do you want to live a life worth remembering? Do you want to leave a legacy? Do you want to offer something to future generations only now brewing in the wombs of their mothers and the hearts of their fathers? Do you want to be worthy ancestors? Do you want to answer the call and stand before kings, not as princes or princesses, but as jesters, making a mockery of power built on bricks towards heaven? Do you believe beauty can save the world? That the stories told within those trenches were more powerful in the hands of the soldiers than their weapons? And do you want to starve out the madness and restore man's appetite for sanity? Do you want to come back to clarity and conviction? Do you want to build a society on the foundations of wisdom instead of self-serving ambition? Well then, plant a garden. Plant a garden in Babylon. Bury your seeds in the soil that you battled against for so long, because this is the only world to which you will ever belong. So turn your exile into Eden and turn your sorrow into a song. Turn your rejection into the birth pains of restoration, and mine from your frustration the potential of growth. Pull from your suffering a morsel of hope, and forgive your captors. Forgive the ones that made you bleed. Let them go. For it is time for us to build. No, it is time for us to sow. No, it is time for us to become the seed, to live in proximity, to lay our lives down so that others one day can simply breathe. Empty the barns in which you've stored. Build a bigger table. Invite your enemies over for dinner and open up your doors. Love your neighbors like you love yourself. And love yourself like you love your neighbors. And for the love of God, remember the poor. Remember the poor. Remember the poor. Sweep your streets like you're paving gold, because in reality you are. How you do anything is how you do everything. Make your stand against injustice loud. No, Make it deafening. Push the needle towards integrity. Pour kintsugi gold into the hostage memory. Turn those ashes into confetti. Burn down the idols and craft wedding rings, covenantal icons from the bed sheets of adultery, and build tree houses for your children in the Garden of Gethsemane. I don't know if we have long left, and I don't know if they'll remember me or you, but we do have work to do, and this may be our legacy. Sunflower shoots in Babylonian cemeteries. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. For they have built empires out of the dust from which they came, and we have watched them fall time and again, but we will not do the same. We have learned from their mistakes. In their place, we will build not high-rise apartments or regal estates, but gardens. Because who is really in prison when steel bars become a trellis? When roses wrap themselves around the fences of a cell, that's when the fires of hell are drowned in the mountain springs that come down from heaven. When my Uncle Terry died, we placed sunflowers on his casket, and we let the tears dry on our skin. We vowed, despite the powers in present darkness, we would not cower, nor would we give in. Thank you.
What a beautiful picture it is to plant gardens among the rubble. That prison bar has become a trellis. Who would have thought that the gentle and lowly work of cultivation would be what redeems the rubble of darkness? There's no great power in this, and yet evil retreats from these small decisions to be gardeners, cultivators, peacemakers in exile. And while some may disagree, I do think it's fair to take the illustration of exile for our current moment. I'm reminded of a passage in Hebrews 11 where people are being commended for living by faith. And it says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they're looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Much like the exile of God's people to Babylon, we are waiting for our true home. And as we wait, we are to faithfully live as Jesus has shown and taught us to live. We are to plant gardens with our everyday acts of goodness and peace to those around us. We are to seek the prosperity of our cities and their peace. We're to pray for our cities, and we're to pray for our national and our global leaders. So how do we live each day when there can be such overwhelmingly dark things happening around us? What do we do when hope feels small or unimportant or even naive? While it's easier said than done, I think we are to be cultivators and gardeners of goodness in our communities. We must shake off the belief that it is only great power that resists darkness, but rather it is the small, ordinary decisions of everyday life that do the most good for ourselves and our communities. We also can't do this alone. If we're honest, at times we're just too overwhelmed, or we lack belief that anything could make a difference. In these moments, we need others around us who can shoulder a bit of the weight. We all hit the wall at different times and for different lengths of time, and I'm convinced that it's primarily through others that we can get over those slumps. The book of Proverbs even encourages us to work with others, because when one falls, the other can help them up. So let us plant gardens with others. We don't need some grand plan or meticulous strategy. We can start today with decisions that garner love and joy, peace and patience, kindness and goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We can love our neighbor. We can care for the poor and the abandoned. And we can delight in the goodness of community together. If we all start with these simple decisions each day, I can only wonder at how we might begin to shed light in the dark places around us. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us for this installment of Slow to Speak. I'm so happy you chose to share this time with us, and I hope you learned something. The whole reason the show exists is to learn by sounding out the ideas and the stories that shape and affect our lives. If you enjoyed this episode or you were impacted by it, would you consider sharing this with your friends or family and maybe leaving a review of the show? I'd also love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments, or even any ideas, things that you'd like to see discussed on the show, you can let me know by emailing slowtospeak@gmail.com. And don't forget the E on the end. Audi alteram partum, everyone. We'll see you next time.